Welcome to the Spirit Pathways podcast. I am Kate Spreckley. Our podcasts offer raw, honest, and authentic conversations on a number of topics that we hope you find informative and inspiring. Okay, so I am here with Nava, who is a Canadian currently living in the wilds of the north, and we're going to be chatting on this, hopefully the first of many podcasts, about whatever is top of mind for both of us and what we are noticing and seeing and experiencing in the world. And before we started the recording, we were chatting about obviously the astrology of this time and how that is going to influence and impact us as we move forward. We are currently recording this on the 8th of February, so we're about to head into a week of prep for the big shifts that come over the weekend with Saturn and Neptune conjunction, and there is a new moon coming up. And we were talking about obviously the chaos and the confusion that is going to, well, not going to, I think it is happening already. And how there is we're both seeing this, and have for a while, because we've talked about this quite a few times. This recognition of the structures in the world and how they serve the masculine and they don't serve the feminine. And these are the things that are going to need to change because of the shifting consciousness and the unification of the feminine and masculine that is happening for everyone in the world. I don't know if you want to just add to that, Nava.
I feel like you just encapsulated it perfectly.
Oh,
That's what we're chatting about.
Yeah. And we were also talking about how, there is all this stuff coming out in the world, and we're starting to really see, I mean, I'm going to name it the darkness that has existed. And there is maybe this is a conditioned response to judge it. And I always like to go back to that place of, like, if we're going into a time where the reunification of the feminine and masculine is key, and a balance of those energies in our world and in ourselves is essential, we cannot be in a space of judgment, because judgment separates us. So if we judge anything, we are reinforcing the separation that has existed, and we actually are going against what consciousness is doing and how it's shifting and how it's evolving and what the energies that are coming in that are asking us to do. And how are you seeing that in your experience? I mean, we're both in very different parts of the world currently. You're in Canada, where I was. Well, I wasn't in the wilds of the north. I was in the wilds of the west coast. And I'm in South Africa currently. So, we're both experiencing very different, or maybe we're seeing everything through a different lens as a result of that, because in South Africa, we tend to just kind of get on with what we need to get on with. So we're kind of seeing all the stuff that's coming out of the States and all the things that are coming to light. But yeah, on the tip of Africa, we kind of think, well, that's over there. It's not really impacting us yet. How are you experiencing it?
I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is seeing women who unconsciously don't realize how this impacts your day to day, and really this idea of women needing to function like men in every aspect of life. And I feel like we just don't, even as women, we don't understand what that looks like because we've never actually lived it or had that experience. And so that's one aspect of it that I've found interesting. It's like you'll be having a conversation with a group of women and you don't actually notice where it's like, yeah, I go to work and I do things like this, and it's like it's a masculine way of doing everything. And then recently, on the flip side, what I've been thinking a lot about and what I've been seeing is the spaces for the masculine. So even though we're seeing the patriarchy is slowly kind of falling apart and disintegrating, part of what that is I feel this masculine energy hasn't been able to function and operate in its true essence. And so as it's falling apart, then you have men that are struggling in a completely different way because they also have never had positive, healthy examples of, well, what does that look like? And it makes people so uncomfortable because it's just a very kind of gray area to be navigating. And like you said, oftentimes I feel like it happens when we go through experiences that trigger shame. And when shame is involved with anything, I feel like you can either go one of two ways. You either embrace it, which most of us have not been taught to do, or the opposite. You run away from it and you kind of put your head in the sand. But yeah, I think I've seen both examples. I feel like more women that I talk to have that awareness of this change that's happening. I think men are going through it, but there just aren't as many spaces for them, or maybe they don't have the language to articulate what the experience is. And again, because of shame or this idea of, oh, you have to suck it up, and this conditioning that we've seen. But I feel like the more men that speak up, that are doing the work, the more spaces are created, kind of the more coherence you start seeing, which is what's necessary. But I don't think it's about women holding this emotional labor for men, because that we know also isn't going to work. But I see it on a daily basis. And even for myself to not react and get frustrated requires a lot of like, okay, I'm going to take a step back. Sometimes I do because it just happens, and I know it's not intentional, but it's like, actually, it's maybe it's, sometimes I say what I think and share this perspective, and I'm the only person who thinks that way, because everyone else in the room is like, no, that's not real, or that's not how it is. Meanwhile, I feel like we're going in that direction. So,
Well, it's interesting because I had a session with someone recently, and I'm trying to think who it was so I can, in my head, work out why and how we came to this conversation. But it was something around how, for as long as we can remember, and I'm not talking about you and I mean, I'm much older than you, but um, like as long as we can remember as humans, the feminine has always served the masculine. And it's I love that you spoke about emotional labor. We processed the emotions, we've supported them, we've encouraged them, we've built them up, we've been the what do they call it, the power behind the throne bullshit. We've been all of that, and that's now shifting because women are like, I'm tired. I'm really,
yeah,
really tired, and this is your shit, and you need to deal with it, and I can't help you with it. Um, and I think we're using the language of we're really tired, but we're not tired. The energy is shifting, and there is no more energy to support the feminine being, I'm going to say, being a servant to the masculine. If
yeah,
we're moving into this place of equal balance and equal power, we actually both serve each other.
yeah, exactly.
There is no more energy for women to do what they have always done for men. It's changing. And the fallout, I think, is interesting. Um, and I think a lot of people kind of blame the lockdowns, and people were forced to spend so much time together and realize that their partnerships or their relationships or their marriages were not quite what they thought they were, because they're no longer distracted by all the things that distracted them before. So there've been a lot of breakdowns of relationships and a lot of marriages ending, a lot of people kind of saying, and a lot of women saying, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm tired. And certainly in my age group, it's, women are blaming perimenopause or menopause on this. And I don't think that that is it, actually. I think that there is a deeper reason, and it's an energetic reason, more than a physical or physiological reason, or even a psychological reason. I think that the energy is feeding those things. And because most people don't have the language like you and I would have to be able to explain it from an energetic perspective, they've got to find something else to explain it.
Right. Well, and as you were sharing that, I was thinking about how I've noticed this shift in awareness of just how someone might go through their own healing journey. And even that, how it instigates and triggers this kind of like, oh, I've always been operating this way. Why have I been operating this way? And then when you start asking those questions, you realize maybe how you've always thought you needed to be is not actually serving you, let's say, in your own spiritual journey and the growth and the lessons you experience in your life. And so I feel like definitely since the pandemic, there's been kind of this like surgence of, people becoming aware of a lot of these things. And like you're saying, it's like when you're kind of confined to an intense environment, it's like the analogy of like coal turning into a diamond. You just get pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And it's like, again, you can go one of two ways. Either you embrace it or you don't, right? And I think for so many people, you just get so fed up with how things are that you're like, okay, I'm going to start working on myself. And then as you start working on yourself, you're like, oh, maybe maybe I should reassess this. And that's for men and women both. I don't think it's just women, but the other thing we were talking about is how just with the like women's bodies, the thing I keep seeing really every month, there's more and more and more that I'm going to say women researchers and women doctors are bringing to light about how we really don't understand anything about our bodies because the whole medical system has been based on men, and I think I saw a TikTok a couple weeks ago. I do appreciate there are a few men who post online about them learning about women's bodies and making it aware for other men. And I think he was saying how what women go through during our period when we lose the egg would take a man 128 years or something to regenerate back. Some crazy number, like it's more than 100 years. And he was like, just think about that. Like, think about what it is that women's bodies have to go through in a 28-day cycle for them to function. And then on top of it, they do all of the things, raising children, taking care, now working. And then there's this level of frustration that comes, right? So it's just like even when I heard that I was like, "Oh my God." Like because again, as a woman, you're trained to downplay it. You're trained to I'm not in pain. I can push through it. I really do think women are stronger than men when it comes to a lot of pain and being able to endure pain.
Yep.
But it's like, yeah, like every day it's like another thing about our bodies that we thought we were crazy. Meanwhile, we just didn't understand the science. And there's actually so many things that we can learn that would make life so much more manageable. But because science has really mostly focused on men, that we don't understand how our bodies work.
I've got two daughters, for those who don't know, and they're both in their 20s now. And I obviously grew up in the 70s and 80s, 90s, and So I'm like, what's it, Gen X? So, everything you see, I mean, it's all very, very amusing and funny, but it's also pretty true. We're pretty hardcore and we were brought up pretty hardcore, and you sucked it up, as a woman, if you suffered, during your monthly period from period pains and all of that, pop a pill and off you go. You still got to do everything that is expected of you. And it's been interesting for me to observe my daughters and then also observe thankfully, I'm a little bit self-aware. So I recognize when the conditioning is rising in me. And so I'm able to stop it before it comes out of my mouth. But I still feel it, which is like, oh, don't be ridiculous. Just get up and go to work. It's like, and luckily I don't say it, but it's the conditioning rises in me, and it's like this judgment and this this perspective of like, don't be weak. I mean, and they're not weak. My girls are incredibly strong individual women. And my elder sent me a reel on Instagram, and I actually wish I could remember the woman's name. It's a um African American woman from the States who's I think she's a director, and she's talking about how hard it is to be in the movie industry as a woman, and how you're expected to operate like a man, and that there's no consideration for the cyclical nature of women, and how we go through these, almost weekly shifts in our body, that is the hormonal shifts and the hormonal changes. And she said, she's observed these cycles in herself, and she can see the times of the month when she's incredibly creative and connected inward, and then there's a time of the month where she's more outgoing and she's more engaged with the world, and able to take action perhaps on the things that she's felt intuitively, or that it came up in that more creative space. And she said, what she's noticed is that it's so frustrating because she'll be in that beautiful creative internal space, and some man decides that a meeting is essential, and now she's got to put on the masculine suit and kind of get into that masculine frame and say, well, now I got to engage in the stupid meeting. And actually, I mean, these are all my words. This is not how she said it. She said it a lot more eloquently and beautifully than I am. I'm butchering it a little bit. But it's, the point is that she was engaging in a masculine space, having to draw on her masculine energy when she was in a time in her cycle where she was feeling that internal pull, and the need to drop into that space, which is highly, highly creative.
Yeah.
And I loved it. It was like, wow, she's just put it so beautifully. I'm gonna try and find it and share it somewhere.
I think again, online, I saw it. Somebody had posted a similar video to kind of just what you just described. And one of the comments said, so what does this mean? Women are only supposed to work 10 days of the month or something like that? And I
Maybe.
was just thinking, how funny would it be if when you're in whatever phase, you have like an automatic email that says, I'm sorry, I'm in my luteal phase. I can't answer. That would be
Well,
so funny.
I'm sorry, didn't some man write some book called The 3 Hour Week or The 4 Hour Week or whatever? Like, hello.
It can work. As you were sharing that, it just reminded me of, I think I told you last week, we went and saw Hamnet,
I know you
and
did.
how,
I
oh, I thought I said it. So we went and watched Hamnet, and within the first, like, I don't know, just the beginning of the film, um, it became so evident that the film was directed from a woman's perspective. And the director is a woman. And I mean, it was a beautiful film altogether. There was so much, I feel like, poetry and artistry that we've lost in films because films are mostly, it's just like candy, it's trash, like there isn't that artistry in the way that I feel like maybe there was that desire before. But it really, this whole idea of how every industry also has been navigated and decisions have been made from only a male perspective, and how much that impacts our everyday life. And even in this movie, it's like the subtle things that you're like, a man would have never thought about that. And it's the funny thing is, I went with one of my brothers, and he's the one that was mentioning it. He's like, this was very clearly from a woman's perspective. And even for myself, I was like, yep, this makes complete sense. And there was a rawness to it with the emotions that you're like, why don't we see more of this? And she's one director. I mean, I don't know what the statistics are of female to male directors in Hollywood, but it was just, I had so much appreciation for the perspective that she shared, especially given just the state of the world right now and with how everything is. It was just like a beautiful ode to, I feel like, this perspective, and raising it up and saying like, it's not all miserable, and emotions are not a bad thing, this picture that gets painted. Like, I just keep thinking about menopause. That's the thing that keeps coming up, which is like, well, women become monsters, and you're like, no, we just don't understand our bodies, and I know I'm not experiencing menopause, but I just think that there's so much misinformation. And so then, even though, yes, it could be the lived experience, like what you're saying, and especially from other generations, older generations, it's like, well, when you were my age, it was a very different reality. So, of course, it's going to take some time to also, like you say, you stop yourself because it's so unconscious sometimes where it comes from. And shame, I was going to say, shame is such a big part of that, right? With everything. It's like, well, don't do that. And then when the shame comes, you're like, it just makes it so uncomfortable. But again, I feel like that's a part of the process of the healing that needs to happen. And the more that we realize that shame doesn't need to be this, it's not a bad thing, but the more we're able to understand these parts of our inner reality, the easier it is to navigate it. I mean, I don't think the pain ever goes away, but you just start understanding more and more why we might react, to something so strongly. So, anyways,
I mean, I think like I went through menopause and I didn't know I was going through menopause.
there
Yeah.
you go.
Gen X are just getting on with it. And
Oh my God.
you know what I find fascinating, it was only when a good friend of mine started going through, and this is like, I don't know, years later, she starts going and she's bitching about all the symptoms and everything she's feeling. And I'm like, you know, I'm sure I went through something similar to that. My head, I thought it was energy. So
Right.
in my head, it's like, it's just energy. This is just energy that's moving through my system. And so I never experienced it in the extreme way that I know some women do. And I have sat with that quite a bit, and I've thought, well, is that just me in denial? Is that me also not having an understanding of something that actually is quite pivotal in a woman's life? And I realized a few things. A lot of it comes down to the fact that for so long, women don't talk about these things.
Yeah.
Like I remember having my babies, and my eldest was a colicky baby. She freaking screamed and screamed and screamed, and I was like, there's something wrong with this kid. I mean, there's this is not okay. This is not right. I didn't expect to have it. I was going to have this beautiful baby, and she was going to be the sweet and gentle little thing that I was going to absolutely love. And meantime, she was this screaming nightmare. And when we would go, I think in the beginning, you go like once a week to a clinic, and you have the baby weighed just to make sure that you're not starving them and they are growing. And then in the clinic that I was going to, they would sit, and you would sit with all the other mothers, and they had tea and coffee, and you could all then chat with these other women, and I would sit there, and I'd be like with my baby, who was beautiful and quiet at that point but screaming in the middle of the night, and I'd be like, yeah, it's that, now that take into consideration these babies are like 3 or 4 weeks old, and I'd say to the other mothers, like, does your baby scream at night and keep you up? And oh no, my little darling is sleeping through the night. Like, are you joking? Every single one of them lied, because I'm telling you right now, 3 and 4 week old babies do not sleep through the night unless you are drugging them or drugging yourself and you're not waking up. But they don't. But no one talks about it. It was like, so I was made to feel like I was this mother who didn't know what she was doing, instead of like everyone going, yeah, no, it's completely normal. Your child is going to wake up every 4 hours or 3 hours, if you're lucky, and mostly every 2 hours, and then you're going to be a wreck for a few months, but you'll get through it. And the thing that it made me so angry, so I made a point of speaking about my experience as a mother with a colicky baby, and how awful it was, and it definitely wasn't what I expected. And even my mother, I remember saying to my mother after like the second week, like, when does the screaming stop? And she was like, no, she'll get to 6 weeks and then she'll stop. She'll be fine. So I literally clung to like 6 weeks of like, okay, I've just got to get through 6 weeks. And I mean, 6 weeks is like 60 years at that time. And get to 66 weeks. She's still screaming. Nothing's changed. So I say to my mother, there's something wrong. She's still screaming. She's still waking up like every 2 hours at night. Like, what's the problem? My mother says, I know I lied because I just I could see that if I told you the truth, you might go and jump off a bridge. It's like, it's to cope with this, not lie to me and say it's going to be 6 weeks and it's not. And and it goes back to like the whole shame thing. I was made to feel ashamed of the fact that people, you say, well, what are you doing to this baby to make her scream all night? I'd be like, trying to feed her, I don't know, trying to get some sleep, I don't know, this first baby, like, there was no one who stepped in and said, and until eventually I phoned my pediatrician, who luckily was my pediatrician when I was a baby, so he'd known me my whole life, and I phoned him and I said, I'm done, there's something wrong with this kid. And he said, there's nothing wrong with her, Kate, she's absolutely fine. I said, no, she's not. She screams all night. Da, da, da. And he said, it's normal, Kate. I said, it's not normal. No one else's babies are doing this. It's not normal. And in fact, if you don't believe me, I'm bringing her to your house and you can have her for the night. He said to me, I'll meet you at the hospital in 10 minutes. I said, great. Off we go to the hospital. And I get to the hospital and the nurses there, she spent 2 nights in the hospital. And the doctor said to me, leave her with the nurses. You go home and sleep. Of course, I felt so guilt-ridden. I didn't do that. I stayed at the hospital with my baby. But the nurses taught me what to do with her, like how to cope when she was in that state of screaming. They taught me, like, where's the female support and the, I was like, oh.
There's so much shame when it comes to that idea of, well, you should just know. It should be an intuitive. That's your maternal instinct. And it's like, how come with everything else in the world, we're like, oh, you need to like study it, you have to learn it. But when it comes to raising children, I'm just going to say raising children in general. Of course, it starts in infancy and usually it's the mother. But for both parents, it's like there is nothing innate. Like there, I feel like, and for, again, for most people, they have not had healthy, good examples. So then what is innate is actually trauma, which is not helpful, right? And so it's kind of funny how much it's like, yeah, you're right. There's so much around shame for not knowing what to do. Meanwhile, you're also correct in saying that it's only recently, I think, that more and more people, like mothers especially, talk about, yeah, in the first however many weeks, I don't know how many weeks it is, but or months, every 2 to 3 hours, you have to feed the baby, which means you're not going to sleep for 2 to 3 months. So the sweet thing that I've seen is how people show up for other people when they know, okay, the parents are not sleeping because every 2 to 3 hours the baby has to feed, right? So then what are things that you can do to support people who are going through that? But yeah, even I think 10 years ago, people weren't talking
Sure.
about it as much as now. Yeah.
I mean, I actually every woman that I know that it has a baby from all the trauma that I went through, I actually have a little pack that I create of like all the essentials: rescue remedy, lavender oil, a well, I don't know what you guys call it there, but a dummy, like a soother. Um, I can't even remember, but it's like a whole little pack. It's like the emergency thing. I know everyone tells you it's going to be wonderful, but there are going to be moments where you're going to need the stuff, so just take
Yeah.
it.
Well, and I feel bad for parents when you feel like what you just described. It's so common that you feel like there's something wrong with you and you're not doing the right thing. Meanwhile, it can be the smallest thing and you just don't know, you know?
And this ridiculous thing, do you know what it was? Wrap
Yeah.
her up tightly.
Oh my God.
Tightly, and then smack her on the bottom, and that was it. And I mean, it worked like a charm. Do you think
Yeah.
anyone? I did 6 weeks. 6 weeks. And you see a screaming baby and they like kicking their fists and their hands and whatever, and you think, okay, well, they want the blanket off, so you unwrap them.
Yeah, yeah. You're like, that's intuitive, but
Oh, it's on. No. But and I think that these things, I think go back to your point about how, there are all these systems in the world that have been established and fueled by masculine energy, but they don't include or don't serve the feminine either. And these are the things that I think we actively are going to be tasked with changing. And I mean, obviously, it's the changes already started. There's a lot of women talking about menopause, and I mean, you get all sorts of like menopause coaching, and I have some views on all of that too, because I think that part of the I mean, I'm careful not to let my conditioning come out at this point, but I want to say, like, part of the problem, maybe I can word it that way, with all of that as well, is that we've been shown a picture of what a perfect woman looks like. And the reality of what is happening internally and all the things that are happening hormonally, and it's not just when you are, in your 50s and 60s, it's when you're 9, starting at 9, sometimes 8. I mean, you have the first few blissful years of your life, and then the hormones start kicking in, and that's it. And it does feel like your body's being taken over by something, and we're not taught, and we haven't been taught to embrace it and to say, okay, well, this is a privilege to be a woman, to be able to give life. And I'm not talking about just having children. We have that creative essence that exists and moves through our body. And I think so many women have rejected that. I mean, I know women who call their period the curse. Really?
Yeah.
It's like, we've got to embrace that. We've got to embrace ourselves at every stage of where we're at, whether we are an 8-year-old who needs her mother and her aunts and her sisters and her female community to come together to kind of show her the different facets of the feminine. And then, as you hit your teens, you again, you need those women to come together. And then you enter into your 20s. And I mean, hormonally, things start changing at 23 again, or 24. And then they start changing again at about 27. And then again at 30, and then again at 35. And, there are all these big significant shifts that happen. And I think that we're not told to embrace it. We're not told, you go to a gynecologist that's a man. I mean, my gynecologist was a man. What was I thinking? Luckily, I can just use the fact that I was young and stupid. But I had a man telling me how I was going to have my babies, and okay, I had to have a C-section with the first one because she was a bit lazy and she didn't move and she was breached and there was no turning her around, which is so her personality too. But with the second one, I was like, oh, I can do this. And he was like, flat out, no. And all the men were saying, no, you're not doing it this way.
I feel like it should be illegal for a man to be a gynecologist.
I agree.
Like, if it was the other way around and there was a female doctor telling a man what he should or shouldn't do about his parts,
Oh,
it would
God.
not be accepted. So
No, not
that just
accepted.
adds to the narrative.
Although, I mean, I have to say, I do know of some female gynecologists that are not so great either. So maybe they just slipped into their masculine energy, embodying that part instead of the feminine. But,
Yeah,
anyhow, I went off on a tangent about,
it's okay.
we were talking about shame.
Yeah, it's okay. That's where the conversation goes. Yeah, I was thinking the other thing that I've been similar to what you were describing, this thing around pregnancy and birth and what that experience is. And really that there's a sacredness to it that we've lost touch because it's turned into a very sterile experience that's very traumatizing for a lot of women because of what their experience is. Like, I know for some of my friends, what they went through when they had their first child, it's like the things that I heard, I was like, first of all, yeah, nobody talks about this. Um, and it's just, it sounds horrific. Like, why would anyone want to go through it? But then when you think about the capacity that women have to be able to carry a child or multiple children for 9 months, and then that our bodies are designed naturally to give birth, and how disconnected we are from our bodies because of shame and all of these things, that you actually can't experience it in the way that it's supposed to be experienced. Like, there's something wrong, and not again to add to the shame, but it's like there's something wrong with the system because we are supposed to be able to give birth, and that's the natural thing to do. But then, for a lot of people, I know it's like when you think about what that whole process is or what they've gone through, it's so painful. And even like what you were saying about periods before, it's like when we experience pain, this is only something recently I found out, is that you're not supposed to experience pain on your period. And I have known so many people over the years that have had serious issues related to their periods. And it's only now, like I'm turning 35, in a month, and only now that for, my generation, where it's like you've essentially been gaslit your whole life on what you should or shouldn't be feeling for your period. Meanwhile, now all these doctors are coming in and saying, you should not be feeling this excruciating pain that you're experiencing. There's something else going on. And again, like you said, you're just supposed to suck it up. And this is what women experience. And it's like, yeah, give me the painkillers. Give me this, give me that. Okay, let's get it done. Meanwhile, it's supposed to be this thing of slowing down. You're supposed to pause. Like, the sacredness in so much of what we do has been completely lost. And I feel like part of it is that aspect of control and the masculine dominating, what women should or shouldn't be doing. But what is it going to require for us to have this kind of unification of the masculine and the feminine? And I think it's an interesting period that we're entering, because you see the awakening that's happening for so many women and men, but we don't know how to navigate it sometimes because of shame, discomfort, vulnerable things of even just being able to admit to say, I have no idea. And can we navigate this together? And so many people struggle with that. This unknown, and being as vulnerable to say, I have no idea what this is, but let's walk together and figure it out. It doesn't need to be this war of the sexes, which I feel like has also been this ongoing thing, because I really, I don't know if at some point we did, I'm sure we did, but this thing of capacity, like there are capacities that women have and there are capacities that men have, and they are complementary. And I just don't think that we have seen enough healthy examples of what that looks like, and to live in unity side by side and seeing what that looks like, which is why it's so confusing right now.
I also think that we can't look back and say, well, we haven't seen any healthy examples of that, because if we understand that the two forces of creation are these two core energies, which are the masculine and the feminine, and for the last 13, well, it's not yet 13, but 12,000 something years, the cycle that we've been in is the masculine has taken the lead and has driven the evolution of humanity's consciousness and awareness, and the feminine step back, and these cycles have been going on for eons. So the feminine had her turn before this one. Yeah. So it's not like the masculine's always been in control. They haven't always been the driver. They haven't. That was the natural movement. This is the first time that we're moving into a movement where the masculine and feminine are stepping into that space of unity and balance and working together. So we can't look back and go, well, where are these healthy partnerships, and where are these healthy people that embody both the masculine and the feminine perfectly, and have that logic and intuition that's weaving together and creating everything, and that hasn't existed. So what we're having to learn to do as and this is every single human being on this planet, whether we're aware of it or not aware of it, it doesn't matter. This is what's happening in us, is this rebalancing of these energies. And initially, what we're going to see is the imbalance. We're going to look at it and we're going to judge it and we're going to criticize it, because that's, what we've done historically too. But actually, what we need to start to get to is, this is not about shaming one or the other. Yeah. This is an acceptance of that was the evolutionary journey that we as humanity embarked on. That evolutionary journey is expanding to a place where it includes both. And now we've got to determine what that both looks like. And that's for us as individuals first. We have to come to a space where we're able to balance that feminine and masculine energy inside of ourselves. And I think a lot of these issues that both women and men have, obviously in different ways, because we physiologically are different. For women, because we can speak to that experience because we are both women, but from that experience, if a girl or a woman is experiencing incredibly painful periods and debilitating to the point where she can't get out of bed, yes, there is a problem. What is the root of that problem? It's an energetic problem, because the root of everything is an energetic imbalance. So work on the energetic imbalance, figure out what that imbalance is. Well, not what it is, what's causing it. Heal that. Work on balancing your masculine and feminine energies, and you should get to a place. And again, it depends on how old you are, because if you've lived for 40 years of your life in this state of imbalance, it's not going to take 5 minutes to get you into balance. It's going to be getting you into balance, and then you'll stay in there for a little bit, and then you got to do it again, and you got to do it again. I'm not going to say it's going to take you another 40 years, but it's going to take a period of time where you've got to remind your system of like, this is what balance is, this is what balance feels like. And it's the same for men, with whatever they're dealing with. And I think in a lot of ways, what this is going to require of us is a softening.
Yeah.
A softening in ourselves, a softening of our judgment, a softening of our shame, a softening of fear, a softening of the, how many women want to rise up and fight the masculine? I did. And I was born into a family that was mostly boys. I did nothing but fight the masculine my whole life. And I had to learn not to do that I didn't have to do that. And my brothers and my father used to make me incensed at, they did nothing because I was the girl. I had to learn to cook, to clean, to do clothing, laundry. It still makes me cross, but it was the way it was.
Well, and the part I know for me, when I sometimes think back to my childhood, was the gaslighting that the women did to each other.
Too.
You know,
No, it
we
was like I
we
was
talked
backed
about
up
it
by
so
my
much.
mother. No, it
Yeah,
was like, you're the girl.
exactly.
That's what you got to do. I'm like, no.
Literally. And it's like, well, I remember at one point, even as like a young kid, because I have brothers and I had boy cousins mostly that I was spending time with. And you find yourself being like, well, how come they can do that and I can't do it? And even from like, sure, a protection standpoint, like my parents were always like, well, you're a girl. It's not safe for you, and even that whole premise, it's like, okay, well, how are you gonna change that? How do you make sure that, those it doesn't prevent you from having those experiences? And um, but even today, it's like I've said something to my brother the other day, and he got so upset because he was like, sometimes he forgets, and he was being honest. He's like, the fact that that's like you have to think about your safety all the time. Like you forget. And it's like, but that's the truth. It's you have to. And again, from a young age, there was so much fear. There was so much fear instilled as a child of you have to be careful. And you think about I mean, it's pretty messed up, the world we live in. But to think about how every single decision you have to make, navigating that, it is exhausting, it's draining. And I mean, hopefully, who knows how long it'll take where you don't have to live in a world where women are always, needing to be thinking about their safety. But I know we're definitely not there yet. But you forget, and unless you have these conversations, like unless I didn't say what I was talking to my brother about, he just wouldn't have known, because it's not something that also always comes up in our daily conversations. But it's so ingrained in your psyche, or this thing of women needing to change themselves to please men. It's like, I mean, I know that's very much, I feel like if you said something like that today, you'd be canceled. Very much so, right? But up until I want to say like 5, 10 years ago, still, it was like the topic of conversation that would always come up. And it's like, there's something wrong with you if you don't do what everybody else does. If you don't just, be quiet, look a
Look
certain
pretty.
way.
Mm.
Yes, put on some lipstick, where's the blush on your face? Like, and it's like, don't speak too highly about your opinions, because men don't like that.
Yes.
It's I personally find that so backwards. But then again, to empathize, like you're saying, not to judge the past,
Mm.
I think requires so much awareness also of ourselves to be like, okay, I'm not going to hold it against, you know, the person who's telling me this because they're 40 years older than me and they're from another generation and they've lived 3 lifetimes before, I was even born. But how can you move forward from that? And that's the part that I feel what I've been noticing. There is so much discomfort. Um, and people really hate sitting in that discomfort. And if there's one thing I've noticed just in the last week, is that is I there's people that'll take that discomfort and look at it from a curious place. And then there's the people that'll just jab you right back because they don't want to look at the covers that you've just opened. And it's like, well, actually, this is how it is. And they'll gaslight you, being like, no, 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 it's not like that. And you're like, no, I'm pretty sure that's what we're looking at. And they will go around you in circles and do everything in their power than to just sit in the discomfort. And I think that's a big theme that I know we've been talking about for, I want to say years now, is sitting in the discomfort. And again, it comes back to me. If I don't learn how to sit in my own discomfort, if I'm going to look around me and blame everybody and everything for my discomfort, then I'm never going to find kind of that peace or that road to reconciliation of how do we make this work? Like let's figure it out together. Um, I am seeing it more and more for sure compared to a few years ago, but there's something about that. It's really uncomfortable for some people to sit in that, oh, I don't like that. No, like, and I think I've been seeing it every day. Every day these last couple of weeks. And it comes sometimes in the randomest context too. You're like, okay, I'm just gonna step away from this, because it's not my stuff. I don't want to engage with it. But sometimes you have no control and you just, you know, you just take it and you move on and you do your best to just focus on yourself. But yeah, sitting in discomfort is a big, big thing. And quieting the mind, I think, is a they're connected. You can't separate the two. And
Well, you can't quiet.
again,
You can't sit. You can't quieten your mind if you can't allow yourself to sit in the discomfort.
no.
But I think you brought up you you brought up something really important here because the aspect of reconciliation and how do we do this? And I mean, I'm half Canadian and half South African, and in South Africa, uh, the people in South Africa created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to help to heal the wounds that were created during apartheid and the struggle for freedom. And it was an incredibly powerful process that the Canadians then asked the South Africans to go and teach so that they could try and implement the same thing in Canada with the First Nations. I don't think it was very successful, but definitely there is, and I think they still teach it at Canadian universities. And I think to come to that place of reconciliation within ourselves. I'm not talking about some historical or collective wound. I'm talking about within ourselves. To come to that place of reconciliation, there are a few things that have to happen. First of all, we have to admit the truth. We have to be willing to see the truth, because we might have been gaslighted by all sorts of different people and systems and whatevers, but we're pretty good at gaslighting ourselves. I mean, I know I can do it. I can be really good at gaslighting myself. I think I'm better at gaslighting myself than I am at gaslighting others. Um, and we do that because the truth is quite hard to face. The
Yeah.
reality of our experience or what we have experienced is really, really challenging to face. And in that space of truth, we have to accept our part in it. It's not about blaming everyone else. We have to accept that we played a part in whatever experience it was. And it's not, again, it's not we don't face this from a place of judgment. It's a place of acceptance.
Yeah.
And when we can get to the acceptance of the truth of the situation, the truth of the experience, whatever it is, and we can accept it and acknowledge it, then we can find our way to reconciling that within us and then letting it go. It's not that we don't forget it or we need to necessarily, I mean, my view on forgiveness, but I won't go into it now. But, this whole idea that you must just forgive yourself and forgive the other person. Well, there's a whole process that happens before you can even get, like, forgiveness is a byproduct. It's not the thing that we got to do. We got to do all the other work, because otherwise it's not really forgiveness. You don't get to that place where you can let it go, because that's what forgiveness is. It's like, I can let this go now. I don't have to hate this person, or I don't have to be angry at that situation. I can just, it was what it was, and I had a part to play in it. Sometimes we don't want to accept that. We don't want to admit it. Far easier to blame someone else and say, well, they made me do it, or they made me feel this way. No one makes you do anything. Unless it's stepping out of that space of being a victim of life.
Yes, yes. And I feel like what you were sharing, it made me think of this thing around accountability and accountability for my actions. And like, yeah, I feel like there's so much around pointing the finger and blaming others. Again, internal discomfort. The stuff inside me is being triggered, and I'm going to look around everything outside of me to try to change that discomfort. I might even move countries to change what's being triggered, you know? But if we lived in a society that was more forgiving, because I do think part of the problem is we treat the world, again, maybe this is a very masculine way of doing things, like it's black and white,
Yes.
but actually our lived experience is very gray.
Mm.
And I feel like with a lot of things, there has to be this case by case
Yes.
analysis. And I feel like that's more feminine. It's, well, let's take a step back, look at the situation. Was this actually fair in this particular circumstance? Because in another circumstance, it might be completely different. But even to have that as a capacity to navigate challenges and things is so hard. And people oftentimes will just throw their hands up in the air and they'll say, well, but that's not the law, or that is the law, you know? But really it's like, well, what's the big picture in all of this? And it's, yeah, it's funny. This thing around accountability, I feel like, I mean, it's integrated with shame again, like what you were saying. And I'm trying to think of examples of where I've seen, like, I mean, even in governments, where how many times do you see where there's an apology, not for the sake of the apology, but acknowledging, okay, we did this and we should have done it differently, and we made a mistake, and we're going to do these things to repair whatever. And how do you see that in any context, in relationships? And I feel like nothing is black and white, but a lot of what we do is this black and white way of
Maybe
functioning
it's
and
the
ignoring a
perspective
lot.
that we have as black or white. It's right or wrong.
Yes, yes.
Again, judgment. It's not. It's like you got to, and again, I like your thing of like, you got to look at it case by case, because what is, I can share an experience that I've had. You can share a similar experience. On the surface, if you had to write out in black and white, it's the same thing. I mean, in constellations, we talk about, when we do a constellation, it's like we're not really interested in the story, because there are themes in humanity, and those themes are war, grief, loss, betrayal, rejection, abandonment, all those kind of core wounds. And so when you talk about the story, like you personalize something that is actually, it's a lot bigger than us as individuals,
Yeah.
And so when you do a constellation, it's like you just want to get to the entangled bit, like what between you and me is entangled here, and now this needs to be untangled. And it's a seemingly very simple process, but it's incredibly profound, especially because you're not invested in the story. I don't know the story, you might know the story, but even the story limits our view, because we see it through that lens, which in our mind is a black and white lens, or a black or white lens, when in fact, because we're so stuck in that black or white, we don't see what is the truth. And I mean, the amount of times that I have seen people in constellations, like the realization hits of like how wrong they got it, like how wrong their perception was about a situation that they have lived with their entire lives, that has defined everything that they've done, every choice that they have made. And they sit there with like, oh my God, look at what I've caused myself. I've caused myself all this suffering because that's how I decided to see things.
Yeah.
And mostly it's never the truth. And I'm always afraid. I'm always amazed at how afraid people are to do constellations. I'm like, I don't know how free it's going to be. Yeah, it might in the middle of it might be a little bit shocking to see how you've deluded yourself or gaslit yourself or read this whole situation very badly wrong.
Yeah.
But afterwards, it's like, I can let this go. We carry these weights of stuff that we don't need to carry. And it's, I mean, I often think of like, what if, I'm not questioning whether I should even say this. Okay, but I'm going to say it. I mean, what if we could even look at trauma as something that is just an experience that we have chosen to have to grow? Instead of making it something that defines us and defines how we engage with life. Like, I mean, imagine if we all could just go, okay, well, I needed that shit experience. I mean, having a colicky baby who screamed all the time set me on my path, I mean, not really. Having her did, but, and I think the screaming bit was part of that. And I mean, that's just a stupid example of what I call trauma. I mean, for me, it was traumatic, but I no longer see it as traumatic. It was like, it was an experience that shifted me in such a way that I was like determined to not live life like other mothers and wives and women were doing. I was like, this is bullshit. We gotta stop lying. We've covered a lot of topics in one little podcast.
Yeah. I feel like we could also keep going on and on and on.
We could. We'll have to save it for the next one, because I think we've definitely gone on. But thank you so much for agreeing to this. I think it's an important. You and I've always had very interesting conversations, and I appreciate it and love them. And I think that you bring a different perspective to what I bring. We might agree in the middle, but being much younger than me, I think it means you see the world in your way, I see the world in my way, and we can find a middle ground to agree.
Well, and I'm grateful that you have created the space because I also appreciate anytime there's an opportunity to kind of have these conversations and explore reality because I feel like you need more of this opportunity to just talk about these things and because we're all figuring it out, you know? So
I
thank
think
you.
that's, yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, is that we are figuring it out, and then we have to
Yeah,
remind ourselves, like, there isn't actually a right or wrong, because no one knows. Like, we are
yeah,
entering into a time we've never been into. Humanity has
yeah,
never been here. And
yeah,
we have to remind ourselves, and that'll let us off the hook. It's okay to say, I don't know what the fuck is going on. I don't know where I'm
yeah.
going. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't, I mean, mostly I can't remember what I'm going to be doing next week, but it's like we don't know, we
Yeah.
don't know. We don't know what this is gonna where this is gonna take us. And I think if we can be curious and then hopefully excited, I mean, I think it'll be fun.
Well, who knows what we'll discover? It's exciting.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you to all those who've gotten to this point at the end and managed to get to follow us. And we'll hopefully bring you another one of these soon.